By now, all of us are aware that there's a serious housing shortage in the Bay Area. If you've tried to buy a house or rent an apartment, then you know just how serious the situation has become. But while high interest rates or limited vacancies are serious enough to contend with, there are many people who have to face the added evil of discrimination. About 12 years ago, state and federal laws were established to help fight racial discrimination in housing. Today we find that the problem is still very much with us.
Sometimes people are very open and honest about it. They'll say, we have no blacks in our building and we want to keep our building this way. That's why we do not advertise.
Sometimes they're just nasty. You know, like they'll open the door and, what do you want? You know, oh, we have no apartments. Bang. And the white church will walk in and rent the apartment. 5 minutes later.
So then I got an application and I filled it out. But then later on, 3 weeks later, I called back, and so she said that I couldn't get the apartment. And I was sort of shocked, and I didn't really know what was going on. So my Caucasian friends that I have, and they're the one who told me it was discrimination.
How serious is housing discrimination today? According to state figures, there were about 5,000 complaints of discrimination in California last year. Most were filed by blacks and other minorities. That's a 47% increase over the previous year. In the Bay Area, the incidence of housing discrimination reflects the national picture.
There's a very good chance that they will encounter some discrimination. The past audits have shown that discrimination against minorities run at between 60 and 80% in the Bay Area. So that is the chance of discrimination a minority will face in the Bay Area.
This is Operation Sentinel, and what we do is provide a rent increase mediation service for the city of Santa Clara.
Ann Marquardt's organization, Operation Sentinel, is the largest fair housing group in the Bay Area. They monitor housing complaints in San Francisco, Oakland, Marin, and parts of San Mateo and Santa Clara counties.
So what we will do, we will find out if the place is still vacant.
It's incredibly hard to prove a housing discrimination complaint. The acts of discrimination today are becoming more and more subtle, and that means our methods of detection have to become more and more acute. Timing as to when we send out our checkers is crucial. We can't wait an hour in between sending out a white or a black checker. And 90% of the calls for service to our agency do come from blacks.
In order to prove a case of discrimination, Operation Sentinel runs checks on the apartment or house in question. This woman is a checker for Operation Sentinel. She has been sent to this apartment building in the Lake Merritt area of Oakland in order to inquire about a place for rent. Operation Sentinel has received numerous complaints from blacks about how they are treated here. Afterwards, another checker is sent to the same building. This time, the man posing as the prospective tenant is black. Later, the checkers reveal what happened when they talked to the manager.
She told me the apartment would be available as soon as the carpet was laid. They're painting now. I could talk to my husband. If I was interested in it, to please come back and call her. She asked how long I had been on my job, okay, our income, what my husband did, where we live now, and why I was moving. Yes, she was interested.
So we went directly to the apartment, and she went through it very quickly. And said, and I asked her how soon would it be ready. And I said it was very nice. And I thought my wife would like it. She said, well, I don't know how to talk to my boss about that. I said, well, can I fill out an application? She said, oh, no, we don't do that. He'll call you if he wants you to have the apartment. And I said, well, he who? Would I know who to expect to call? She said, well, I'll take you downstairs and I'll give you all this information. So we left. About as quick as I'm saying this, went down to her apartment. She wasn't eager to rent the place. Wasn't even happy to show it to me.
After further checks are made by telephone, Operation Sentinel refers the case to an attorney who then files a lawsuit on behalf of the complainant.
What we've seen in the 12 years or so that the fair housing laws have been on the books and have been enforced is that the courts are becoming more sympathetic, more knowledgeable about violations of the fair housing law, and enforcement is becoming easier.
Even when they win in court, victims of housing discrimination win very little in compensation. That has been changing recently as juries have awarded larger and larger settlements. One of the biggest settlements involved the Rockridge complex here in Oakland. It was a landmark case. The experts say will have a very big impact on the fight against housing discrimination. Fair housing advocates won a class action suit against the owners of the complex last year. It was the first time that the courts had allowed a class action in a housing discrimination case. Lawyers were able to show that as many as 9,000 blacks who were seeking apartments here were discriminated against.
The Rockridge case in Oakland is a prime example of the subtle ways that were used to discriminate. And here the managers came forth in court depositions and testified before the court how they were instructed to show black applicants a unit that was not cleaned up, that was on a very noisy street, where all the other units were on the inside of the complex, facing swimming pools and other amenities. And they would show the black applicants only this outside noisy unit that wasn't cleaned up. They would not show the black applicants the other amenities of the unit.
As a result, the settlement for the victims may total as much as $50 million.
And so now what we have available as a result of the decision in the King versus Casal case is the ability to go to court in an individual case where a couple is being discriminated against. And if as a result of the records of the apartment complex or otherwise we can show that this is a consistent pattern on the part of this owner, we can bring a class action. And every class member has the same right to damages as the individual person.
Fair housing groups have identified these Bay Area communities as having housing discrimination problems. There may be more, but not every city has a fair housing group to act as a watchdog. One community that has been closely scrutinized is San Leandro. 10 years ago, a government study described it as a white ghetto. It found that San Leandro was one of the most discriminatory cities in the Bay Area. In a moment, we'll take a look at what it was like in San Leandro 10 years ago and whether that city has changed since then. This is East Oakland, a neighborhood that is more than 80% black. And this is Durant Avenue, the boundary between East Oakland and San Leandro, a community that is more than 80% white. Now, this street, it has been said in the past, forms an invisible wall which keeps black people from living in San Leandro. The question that's being debated today is this: does that invisible wall still exist? 10 years ago, a TV documentary by Westinghouse Broadcasting found that there was definitely such a wall.
San Leandro has more than 68,000 residents. Only 84 are black. More than 15,000 homes are owned by whites. 15 are owned by blacks.
We didn't see inside any houses. We couldn't get any real estate brokers to take us in and show us any property in the city, in the community.
This is the experience of one young black couple. They asked that their identity not be made known. They are both professionals with a combined income of more than $15,000. They looked for a home for 4 months. In San Leandro, they were never shown a piece of property.
I really don't think there's that much demand from black people to be in San Leandro, because if you analyze what San Leandro has to offer in the way of cultural community activity, I really don't think they have that much.
What was it like in San Leandro for you?
It was terrible.
Why?
Because there wasn't nothing to do, there was nobody to say, and all they did was call you names.
What did they call you?
Nigger, blackie, and they was sometimes they would call me Charcoal and stuff like that.
It seems to me the blacks are accustomed to their own social and cultural circles in which they move, and they like it this way. I think they feel out of place when they come into an area that doesn't provide the things that they're accustomed to.
Have you ever heard any black people say this?
No.
San Leandro today is a different community from what it was 10 years ago. For one thing, the black population has increased from 84 to 763. That's out of a total population of more than 63,000 people. Larry and Mary Taft were one of the first black couples to buy a house in San Leandro a decade ago. Like other blacks, they encountered problems after the real estate agent agreed over the phone to show them the house.
The problem that I had was the man was willing to rent to us over the phone because he was very impressed with my husband's position and everything like that, and he actually had rented to another couple, to a younger couple, but he was more impressed by our salary because he figured we'd be more able to pay. And when he came over, well, saw us sitting there, it was a little different story. There were a few games going on.
What kinds of games were being played?
It was the hesitation. It was the hesitation to close the deal, you know. It was the change of his attitude when he saw us. And
is there a race problem in San Leandro?
I think that up until about 1974, there was a severe race problem. Severe. In the respect that there was a determined effort on the part of some people in San Leandro to keep Oaklanders out. But I would say a tremendous amount of progress has been made. And if you want to talk about discrimination, I would say that there is more discrimination in San Leandro between young mothers with a kid, divorced, people with animals, than there is against, say, a black with the ability to pay.
But the problem of housing discrimination persists. San Leandro Fair Housing reports that housing complaints have increased in the last 3 years. Last year, they received 31 complaints. 20 involved racial discrimination. This woman is the latest victim. Her identity was concealed because her case is still pending and may go to court.
The Fair Housing sent a black person out, and the black person was discouraged. And afterwards, they sent a white person out who was totally encouraged. When this happened to me, I felt belittled, I felt humiliated, and I felt a great deal of aggravation, really.
I don't know why there's a smaller number of black families living in San Leandro than people might expect to be living here, given the proximity of Oakland. But I think a lot of the reasons for that may not be discrimination. They have basis in economic and social concerns. I think from what I've heard, there are a number of black families that prefer not to live in San Leandro for whatever reason.
As you might have guessed, very few people in San Leandro were happy with the portrayal of their community as a racist, closed, suburban town. What we'd like to know is how the people who live here today feel about the housing situation in San Leandro. And so we're here in the living room of a home in this town, talking with some people who have an interest in the housing situation. Is there a housing discrimination problem in San Leandro?
In talking to people, I think a lot of them just feel that they still feel that as minorities, San Leandro is closed to them. I mean, this is what people express to me when I talk to them. It's sort of like, I don't even bother trying to attempt to live there because I don't feel that, you know, I'm going to get a place.
I don't have a straight answer as to why in 20 years that I haven't sold a minority family, black, a home in San Leandro. I can't answer it. I can only make reference, and maybe, you know, they can give me some input, but I can only recall one instance where I really had a good buyer. Drove him through Washington Manor, Bond Manor, took him all over the place, showing him different houses, and he made the statement to me that he felt more comfortable living in an area that was mixed. And frankly, from just a pure individual standpoint, so would I. Okay, I mean, I would seek out my own social, economic, cultural level.
I would disagree with you.
Well, you know, but I think that if it's my little If it's my little feeling as to why I haven't, it's probably that's the biggest reason. And it's amazing that I don't have any trouble. You can call it steering. I don't try to steer, but the guy says, show me an area where there are a few black families on the block, because I like to take off my shirt and have a beer when I'm mowing the lawn, and I feel better about it. And it's...
I think that's stereotype.
It's a terrible thing to say, but
I disagree, because I would disagree, because there is many blacks who own, they're not interested whether another black family is in that block or not.
Oh, I would agree that there are blacks that do that, but I think that San Leandro, in all fairness, probably had a stigma at one time.
Seems to me the problems rest more with apartments than individual single-family homeowners, and I'm pretty pleased to hear that. I think anybody who can afford a single-family house within San Leandro can live here.
I don't think the problem will ever be resolved, but I do think perhaps as opposed to 10 years ago that maybe the problem is better today than it was then.
All of these people agree that San Leandro is no worse than a lot of other Bay Area communities. And because it has come under so much scrutiny, San Leandro has probably done more than most suburban towns to tackle the problem of housing discrimination. As we said earlier, housing discrimination is a form of racism that is often very hard to prove. But fair housing groups believe that you can fight it if you are willing to pursue it. So if you suspect that you have been discriminated against, go to the phone and dial housing, HOUSING. And you can call that number from anywhere in the Bay Area. We'll be back right after this.